I couldn't believe what I was seeing. A white SUV with Oak Ridge Estates HOA security printed on the side sat parked right across my driveway, blocking me in. Again. But this time, something felt off. I was already running late for a career-changing presentation, and now Melissa Carter, the self-proclaimed head of security, was scrolling through her phone like she hadn't just trapped me in my own home. What I didn't know was that this petty inconvenience would lead me to uncover a legal loophole big enough to destroy the entire HOA. I took a deep breath, forced a smile, and knocked on Melissa Carter's window. She jumped, pretending to be surprised. "Oh, didn't see you there. Is there a problem?" I clenched my jaw. "Yeah, Melissa. There is. You're blocking my driveway and I have to get to work." Her fake smile didn't budge as she flipped through a clipboard stacked with papers. "According to our records, you have 3 active violations." She read them off like a judge delivering a sentence. "Your porch light was left on past 11 p.m. last Thursday. Your trash bin was visible from the street for 6 minutes after collection time. And your mailbox is an unapproved design." I let out a sharp laugh. "Melissa, that's ridiculous. My porch light is on a timer. My trash bin was out for maybe 5 minutes, tops. And my mailbox? It's the same one I've had for 10 years. She gave a slow, condescending nod. "Well, someone reported it, so I'm required to investigate. The board meeting is next Thursday at 7 p.m. if you want to dispute the fines." I checked my watch. I had 15 minutes to get downtown. My boss had already texted me once. If I missed this meeting, my promotion was gone. "Melissa, move your car, now." She tapped at her phone. "Actually, under HOA bylaw section 8.2, security has full authority to restrict access during a violation investigation." I stared at her car. It wasn't even a real security vehicle, just her personal SUV with a cheap magnetic sign stuck to the side. That's when I pulled out my phone and started recording. "So, just to clarify," I said, making sure her HOA badge, clipboard, and fake security car were all in the frame. "You're officially here as HOA security?" She straightened her posture. "Of course." "And you have proper licensing for that?" Her smile twitched. "That's confidential HOA information." Bingo. I wasn't sure if impersonating security personnel was technically illegal, but the way her face tightened told me I'd just hit a nerve. "Melissa, move your car, or I'll call the real police and report you for false imprisonment." Her lips pursed. She yanked her car into drive, nearly clipping my trash bin on the way out. "This isn't over," she hissed. "The board will hear about your aggressive behavior." As I sped toward downtown, one thought nagged at me. How did Melissa get this much power so fast? And more importantly, what would I find if I started digging? I made it to my presentation with 2 minutes to spare, but my mind wasn't in the room. Melissa's smug face, her bogus violations, that fake security car, something wasn't right. That night, after way too much coffee, I opened my laptop and started digging. I figured I'd find some overcomplicated HOA rules, maybe a loophole to fight the fines. What I actually found was so much bigger. I started with county records, searching for Oak Ridge Estates HOA's legal filings. I expected a dense, boring document. Instead, I found something missing. The HOA's incorporation had expired 6 years ago. I blinked at the screen. That couldn't be right. If the HOA's incorporation had lapsed and was never renewed, then legally, it didn't exist anymore. Every fine, every rule, every security patrol, all of it was invalid. My hands shook as I grabbed my phone, ready to text my neighbors, but I stopped myself. If Melissa or the HOA board found out what I knew, they'd bury the evidence before I could use it. I needed to be smart. Just then, my phone buzzed with a new violation notice. Unauthorized mailbox design, $175 fine. Porch light infraction, $200 fine. Melissa was doubling down. Then, at 11:47 p.m., my doorbell rang. Through my security camera, I saw Frank Harrison, my elderly neighbor, hunched over in his wheelchair, soaked from the rain. I rushed to let him in. "I'm sorry to bother you so late," he said, shivering. "But I didn't know where else to turn." His hands trembled as he handed me a stack of violation notices. $600 fine for overgrown grass. $400 fine for improper landscaping. Frank had been in the hospital for 3 weeks after surgery. His lawn service couldn't access his property because, guess what? Melissa's security vehicle had been blocking his driveway. The latest notice threatened a lien on his home. Frank had lived in this neighborhood for 30 years, long before the HOA even existed. Seeing this decorated veteran on the verge of tears over Melissa's harassment, something inside me snapped. "Frank," I said, pulling up the county records on my laptop, "what if I told you I found something that could stop all of this?" His eyes widened. I'd say, "Tell me everything." As I explained what I'd discovered, Frank's face went from exhausted to furious. But then, we found something even worse. While helping Frank research his property lines for his appeal, we discovered that the HOA's official boundaries from 1997 didn't even include his house, or 5 others on our street. Melissa had been issuing fines and threats to homeowners who weren't even part of the HOA. The next morning, I called in sick to work. This was too important. I drove straight to the county records office. The clerk, Donna Reynolds, an older woman with reading glasses and a sharp eye, watched as I spread out my papers. "You're looking for HOA documents, huh?" she asked knowingly. I nodded. She adjusted her glasses, flipped through the files, then frowned. "Oh, honey, these boundaries are all wrong." She pointed at a notary stamp on the HOA's original filing. "See this? That's not even a real notary number." My heart pounded. "You mean, this document is fake?" She pulled out more files, scanning them with a practiced eye. "Not just fake, there are multiple errors. Dates don't match, signatures don't line up, permits were never properly filed." She looked up at me, serious. "Whatever's going on with your HOA, it's dirty. Be careful." And as I made certified copies of everything, my phone buzzed again. Melissa was calling me. I declined. Then, as I stepped out of the building, I noticed something in my rearview mirror. A black Ford Explorer. The same one Melissa had been using as her HOA security vehicle. Following me. Instead of heading home, I drove straight to the police station. As expected, the car made a sharp U-turn the moment I pulled into the parking lot. I walked inside and filed a formal harassment report. The officer at the desk, Officer Blake, looked concerned. "These security guards, do they have proper licensing?" "I don't think so," I said. He typed something into his computer. "Because I just checked, and there's no record of any licensed HOA security company under Oak Ridge Estates." Another piece of the puzzle clicked into place. This wasn't just expired paperwork anymore. This was a criminal operation. Melissa wasn't just enforcing fake rules, she was running an illegal racket. And now, I had proof. By the time I got home, my mind was racing. Melissa wasn't just a power-hungry HOA enforcer, she was running a full-blown scam under the guise of neighborhood security. And I had the paper trail to prove it. I started compiling everything into a secure folder on my computer. HOA incorporation expired 6 years ago, meaning every fine, rule, and fee since then was illegal. HOA boundaries excluded 6 houses. Yet Melissa had been issuing thousands of dollars in fake fines to those homeowners. Forgery and mismatched records, proving that some of the HOA documents were completely fraudulent. No licensed HOA security company exists, meaning Melissa's security team was a total sham. I had enough to take them down, but I needed more eyes on this. The neighborhood fight back begins. The next evening, 25 of my neighbors slipped into my garage. Frank wheeled himself to the front, still weak from surgery, while Lisa Morales clutched a stack of violation notices about her non-regulation flower beds. "They fined me $500 for a garden I planted in memory of my husband," Lisa choked out. Mrs. Bennett, who had baked cookies for every new neighbor for 20 years, held up a threatening letter from the HOA. They said they'll put a lien on my home because my son installed a wheelchair ramp after my hip surgery. David Whitmore, the high school art teacher, spread out photos of his house. They made me repaint my house 3 times because cloud gray wasn't the exact shade of morning frost. Cost me my whole summer savings. Every story was worse than the last. I pulled up my laptop and projected the HOA's records onto the garage wall. "Listen up," I said, steady and loud. "What I'm about to tell you doesn't leave this room. I found something that can end all of this." I walked them through it all: the expired HOA status, the fake security team, the forged documents. The room went silent. Then Frank spoke up. "We need to take this public." Heads nodded. "Not yet," I said. "If we move too soon, Melissa will cover her tracks. We need to hit them when they can't escape." Emily, my next-door neighbor and a paralegal, raised her hand. "We should check the HOA's financial records. If they've been running scams, there's got to be missing money." Lisa's eyes widened. "I have an idea. Melissa's assistant, Rachel, hates her. I bet she'd talk." The plan was set. Emily would track HOA finances. Lisa would approach Rachel. Frank and I would gather more testimonials from homeowners. We'd all stay quiet until the next HOA meeting. Then we'd drop the bomb. The final piece falls into place. 2 days later, Lisa texted me. "Rachel wants to talk. Meet her behind Town Hall at noon." At exactly 12 p.m., I parked near the dumpsters behind the building. Rachel Owens, Melissa's assistant, was already there, nervously clutching a manila folder. "I can't do this anymore," she whispered. "I saw what they did to Mrs. Bennett. I saw Melissa laugh about it." I opened the folder. What I saw made my blood run cold. Bank statements showing thousands of dollars in HOA fines, transferred to a consulting firm owned by Melissa's husband. Emails between Melissa and a real estate developer, planning to sell multiple homes in our neighborhood for a shopping complex. Expense reports proving HOA funds had been used to pay for Melissa's personal house renovations, vacations, and even her private security system. Melissa wasn't just a scammer. She was embezzling money. "How much do you think she's stolen?" I asked. Rachel swallowed. "At least $250,000, maybe more." I snapped photos of every page and sent them to Emily. She replied in seconds. "This isn't just HOA fraud. This is a felony." Melissa strikes back. That night, I got home to find bright orange violation notices plastered all over my front door. Unauthorized mailbox, $300 fine. Non-regulation welcome mat, $175 fine. Improper trash placement, $250 fine. Melissa was lashing out. Then, as I walked to my car the next morning, I froze. My massive oak tree, the one my father had planted when I was born, was lying on its side. It had been cut down overnight. The treehouse I built for my daughter, smashed to pieces. A neon orange HOA violation sticker fluttered in the wind. Emergency removal of unauthorized landscaping elements. My stomach dropped. Across the street, Melissa stood on her porch, sipping coffee, smiling. She wanted me to react. She wanted me to break. Instead, I pulled out my phone, took a photo of the wreckage, and sent it to Frank, Emily, Lisa, and Rachel. "We take her down tomorrow." Melissa thought she had won. She thought cutting down my tree, trashing my property, and burying me in fines would break me. But all she did was light the match that would burn her empire to the ground. I wasn't just fighting back for myself anymore. This was for Frank, for Lisa, for Mrs. Bennett, for every neighbor she had terrorized. Tomorrow, at the HOA meeting, we weren't just going to expose her. We were going to dismantle the entire HOA. Step 1. The final gathering. That night, my garage filled up again, but this time there were twice as many neighbors. Frank sat at the front, his wheelchair positioned like a battle commander. Emily, Lisa, and David were beside him, their faces set with determination. I pulled up my laptop, casting an enlarged version of the HOA's fraudulent financial records onto the garage wall. "This is it," I said, pointing at the bank transfers. "Melissa isn't just scamming us. She's been stealing HOA funds to renovate her house, go on luxury vacations, and fund her fake security force." Gasps filled the room. "And it gets worse," I continued, flipping to the developer contracts. "Melissa has been planning to sell some of our homes to developers without telling us." The silence was deafening. Then Mrs. Bennett, the sweet elderly woman who had been fined for a wheelchair ramp, stood up. "She's not just a bully," she said, her voice shaking. "She's a thief." "We take this public," Emily said firmly. Lisa nodded. "We need the press, the city council, the police. We need to make sure Melissa can't weasel her way out of this." I nodded. "That's why we're hitting her with everything, all at once." The plan. I would confront Melissa at the HOA meeting with the financial records and expired incorporation papers. Emily and David would be recording everything, streaming it live to our Oak Ridge Neighborhood Watch group. Lisa would forward all evidence to the local news right before the meeting started. Frank would hand-deliver the documents to the town's legal department and the police station. By the time Melissa realized what was happening, it would be too late. Step 2. Setting the trap. The next morning, violation notices were stuffed in every mailbox in the neighborhood. Melissa was trying to tighten her grip before the meeting. But this time, no one was scared. Neighbors ripped them up on sight, some even taping them to their trash bins in mockery. At 6:50 p.m., we lined up outside the community center, waiting for the doors to open. Melissa arrived fashionably late, stepping out of her white BMW, dressed like she was untouchable. Her 2 fake security guards flanked her. "Big turnout tonight," she said smugly, looking around. "Guess you all finally care about community standards." "Oh, we care," I shot back. Melissa just smirked and sauntered inside. She has no idea what's coming. Step 3. Dropping the bomb. The meeting started as usual, with Melissa banging her gavel, acting like a queen addressing her subjects. "We are here today to address growing concerns over compliance violations," she announced, "and to reaffirm the importance of maintaining our community's integrity." "Actually," I interrupted, standing up, "we're here to talk about you." Gasps rippled through the room. Melissa narrowed her eyes. "Excuse me." I walked to the front, dropping a thick folder of legal documents onto the table. "Melissa, would you like to explain why Oak Ridge Estates HOA's incorporation expired 6 years ago?" The color drained from her face. The room erupted in whispers. I flipped to the next page. "Would you also like to explain why you've been illegally collecting fines and threatening homeowners with foreclosure when the HOA hasn't had legal authority to do anything?" Gasps turned into outrage. Melissa snatched the papers, her hands shaking. "This is ridiculous! Who fed you this nonsense?" I pulled out my phone and cast the bank statements onto the projector screen. "And let's not forget the $250,000 you've stolen from HOA funds. Payments to your husband's fake consulting firm, unauthorized security expenses, renovations to your private residence." The room exploded. David stood up, holding up his phone. "And in case anyone missed it, this is all being streamed live to the neighborhood." Melissa sputtered. Rachel, her former assistant, stood up from the back of the room and held up a USB drive. "I have copies of every fraudulent transaction," she said. "I've already sent them to the city's financial crimes division." Melissa's fake confidence shattered. You don't understand," she stammered. "I built this HOA. I made this community what it is." But Lisa's voice rang out. "No, you made it a nightmare." Then, right on cue, the doors burst open. 2 uniformed officers strode in, followed by Frank, who had just come from the police station. "Melissa Carter," Officer Blake said, stepping forward. "We need you to come with us." The entire room watched in stunned silence as Melissa turned pale. "You can't do this!" she shrieked. "I run this neighborhood!" "Not anymore," I said. She tried to lunge for her purse, but Officer Blake was faster, snapping handcuffs around her wrists. The crowd cheered. Step 4. The aftermath. With Melissa gone, the HOA crumbled within days. Every illegal fine was voided. Every homeowner who had been scammed got their money back, with interest. The security cameras Melissa had installed, we kept them up. Not to catch violations, but to document good things happening in our community. Neighbors actually started talking to each other again. Frank's lawn was mowed for free by volunteers while he recovered. Lisa's garden flourished. Mrs. Bennett? She kept her wheelchair ramp. And the best part? Without the HOA's constant harassment, property values actually went up. As for Melissa, the financial crimes investigation found even more dirt. She's looking at 10+ years in prison. Rumor has it she tried to move to a new neighborhood, but the second they Googled her name, her application was denied. Funny how that works. The final lesson. As I sat on my porch, watching my newly planted oak sapling sway in the breeze, I realized something. The scariest rules aren't the ones in the rule book. They're the ones we let people make up to control us. And sometimes, the only way to break free is to stand up and say no. Melissa's reign was over. The entire neighborhood watched in stunned silence as she was led out in handcuffs, her carefully constructed empire collapsing in real time. Her perfectly pressed blazer was wrinkled, her pristine makeup smudged. But the worst part? She still thought she could win. "This is illegal!" she shrieked, twisting in Officer Blake's grip. "I am the HOA! I am the law in this neighborhood!" Nobody came to her defense. Nobody even looked sympathetic. We all stood there, watching her go, the same way she had stood on her porch watching us suffer under her fake violations and rigged fines. Lisa crossed her arms. "Funny, I don't remember voting for a dictator." The officers pushed Melissa into the squad car, slamming the door shut, and then the entire neighborhood cheered. The aftermath. Picking up the pieces. With Melissa gone, the HOA board crumbled within days. Her so-called security team disappeared overnight, probably because they knew the police were investigating them too. But the damage Melissa had caused? That was going to take time to fix. The very next morning, we woke up to find bright orange violation stickers slapped onto every single mailbox in the neighborhood. Her last desperate act of revenge before being arrested. Instead of getting angry, we turned it into a joke. People took selfies with their violations, taping them onto trash cans, sticking them onto community bulletin boards. Emily even framed one and hung it in her living room. "A souvenir," she said, grinning, "to remind me never to take HOA nonsense seriously again." But while we laughed, the real work was just beginning. The fight wasn't over yet. HOA or not, the damage was real. Frank was still facing a lien on his home. Mrs. Bennett still had thousands in bogus fines. Lisa's garden was still unapproved. And the stolen money? We didn't know if we'd ever get it back. That's when Emily stood up at our next community meeting. "We could rebuild," she said. "Not an HOA, but a real neighborhood association, one that actually helps people. It started small. We filed paperwork to legally dissolve the HOA. We petitioned the city to drop every fine issued in the past 6 years. We got local news coverage, turning Melissa into a cautionary tale. And then, something incredible happened. People started helping each other. Instead of an HOA dictating rules, neighbors actually talked. When Frank needed his lawn mowed, 5 different people showed up with mowers. When Lisa needed help with her garden, Emily's kids volunteered to help weed. When David needed his house repainted, again, the whole block chipped in to buy paint. We didn't just take down a corrupt HOA. We built something better, a real community. Melissa's final move. For a while, things were quiet. Then, one morning, 3 black SUVs pulled up in front of Town Hall. Out stepped Melissa's daughter, Jennifer Carter, dressed in a power suit, flanked by a team of expensive-looking lawyers. She stood in front of the cameras and announced her plan. "My mother built this community," she declared, "and I intend to restore order. As of today, I am assuming leadership of Oak Ridge Estates HOA." The reporters ate it up. They had no idea the HOA was legally dead, but we did. So, as Jennifer spoke about bringing discipline back, I calmly pulled out my laptop. A few clicks later, our Facebook live stream was up and running. "Jennifer," I called out, cutting through the crowd. She turned, clearly annoyed. "Yes?" I turned my laptop toward the cameras. On the screen, a certified document from the state declaring the HOA officially dissolved. A city council statement confirming that all HOA rules were void. A video of Melissa being arrested. The reporters swarmed me instantly. "Are you saying the HOA is no longer legally active? How long has this been in effect? Is it true that fines were illegally collected for years?" Jennifer's face went pale. "This is ridiculous," she scoffed, but the reporters weren't listening to her anymore. They were turning to us, to Frank, to Lisa, to Mrs. Bennett, to the people who actually lived here. Jennifer tried to save face. She stormed off, cameras flashing as she shoved past reporters. She never came back. Final justice. For Melissa. With Jennifer gone, the legal case against Melissa moved fast. The Financial Crimes Division uncovered even more fraud. Melissa wasn't just stealing from us. She had been laundering money through HOA contracts. Her final sentence? 12 years in federal prison. And the best part? She tried to move into a luxury gated community after her release. They Googled her name and rejected her application on the spot. Poetic justice. The new Oak Ridge neighborhood. A year later, our community looked completely different. The old HOA office? Demolished. A new community garden took its place. The security cameras Melissa had installed? We kept them up. Not to catch violations, but to document good things happening. And property values? They went up. Turns out people actually want to live in a neighborhood where neighbors help each other instead of fining each other over mailbox colors. Final thoughts. The power of saying no. As I sat on my porch, watching my newly planted oak saplings sway in the breeze, I realized something. The scariest rules aren't the ones in the rule book. They're the ones we let people make up to control us. And sometimes, the only way to break free is to stand up and say no. Because in the end, HOAs don't build communities. People do.